Imagine a world of wild, storm-tossed seas, rugged coastlines, and ancient Gaelic traditions. This was the world Gráinne Mhaol was born into around the year 1530. Her story is on one of fairy tale castles and courtly manners. It's a saga etched in sea salt and gunpowder. The tale of a woman who defied an empire and became a legend. Welcome back to our channel, where today we're setting sail into the incredible life of the Irish pirate queen, Gráinne Mhaol. Her story begins on the dramatic coast of County Mayo in the west of Ireland. Grace was the daughter of the chieftain of the O'Malley clan, a family whose name was synonymous with the sea. Now, it's important to understand that the O'Malleys weren't nobles in the way the English understood it. They weren't landed aristocrats, counting their acres of farmland. No, they were Gaelic sea lords. Their power, their wealth, and their very identity came from the turbulent waters of the Atlantic. Their family motto says it all. *Tecumadici potens, powerful by land and by sea. They were masters of a coastal kingdom, their fleet of ships a familiar and formidable sight along the Irish coast. They traded, they fished, they collected taxes from ships passing through their waters. And yes, they engaged in a bit of what you might call piracy. To them, it was simply the law of the sea. From the moment she could walk, Grace, or Gráinne as she was known in Irish, felt the pull of the ocean. It was more than just a backdrop to her childhood. It was her calling. There's a fantastic legend about her as a young girl that perfectly captures her spirit. She desperately wanted to join her father on a trading expedition to Spain, but he refused, telling her that her long, beautiful hair would get tangled in the ship's rigging, a flimsy excuse. Really, just a way of saying a ship is no place for a girl. How did young Grace react? Did she cry? Did she plead? No. In an act of pure defiance, that would set the tone for her entire life. She picked up a knife and chopped off all her hair. She presented herself to her father, shorn and ready to sail. This bold move earned her a nickname that stuck with her forever, Gráinne Mhaol, which translates to Bold Grace. Her father, likely both exasperated and impressed, had no choice but to let her come aboard. And so, her education began. But her classroom wasn't a stuffy chamber. It was the deck of a galley, rolling on the Atlantic swells. She learned the arts of sailing not from books, but from her father's own hands. She learned how to navigate by the stars, how to read the winds and the tides, and how to handle a ship in a storm. She learned the complex art of trade, haggling for wine and silk in the ports of Spain and Portugal. And she learned the brutal art of combat, defending the family fleet from rival clans and pirates. The sea was in her blood. She quickly became a more skilled and audacious sea captain than any of her male relatives. While other girls her age were learning needlepoint, Grace was learning how to plot a course through the most treacherous reefs and hidden coves of the Irish coast. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a mastery of her domain. This intimate knowledge of the coastline would become one of her greatest strategic assets in the years to come. Then, the inevitable happened. Her father, the great chieftain, passed away. In the deeply patriarchal world of 16th century Ireland, everyone expected one of her male relatives, perhaps a brother or an uncle, to take command. The idea of a woman leading a clan of hardened seafarers was, to put it mildly, unthinkable. But Gráinne Mhaol had never cared much for what was thinkable. She had proven her worth on the high seas, time and time again. She had earned the respect and loyalty of the O'Malley sailors, not through her bloodline alone, but through her skill, courage, and leadership. And so, in an unprecedented move, she didn't step aside. She stepped up. She seized control of the O'Malley fleet and declared herself the chieftain of her clan. This was a revolutionary act. A woman, a chieftain, a fleet commander. Grace shattered every convention of her time. She wasn't just her father's daughter anymore. She was the O'Malley *, the undisputed ruler of the seas off the coast of Mayo. This was only the beginning of her story. She was about to build an empire of her own, one that would make her the most powerful and feared woman in Ireland, and a thorn in the side of the most powerful monarch in the world, Queen Elizabeth I. From this point on, Grace's life only got more dramatic. She commanded a fleet of ships, built a network of castles along the coast, married for power, took lovers, and led her men into battle. She became a political player, a pirate, and a protector of the old Gaelic way of life against the encroaching English crown. Her story is a testament to what one determined person can achieve against all odds. Today, we re-sailing into the wild and stormy seas of 16th century Ireland to uncover the story of a true legend, a woman who defied every convention of her time to become a chieftain, a commander, and the undisputed Queen of the Seas. Her name was Gráinne Mhaol, or Gráinne Mhaol, and her story is more epic than any pirate movie you've ever seen. Born around 1530 into the powerful O'Malley clan, Gráinne was destined for a life at sea. The O'Malleys were a seafaring dynasty on the west coast of Ireland, their motto being Teha Mariki, potence, powerful by land and by sea. From a young age, Gráinne yearned to join her father's trading expeditions, but she was told her long hair would get tangled in the ship's ropes. So what did she do? She chopped it all off, earning her the lifelong nickname Gráinne Mhaol, or Bald Gráinne. This single act of defiance set the tone for her entire life. She wasn't just going to follow the rules. She was going to make them. When her father passed away, Gráinne didn't just inherit his legacy. She amplified it. Under her command, the O'Malley enterprise didn't just survive. It flourished. She was a cunning trader, a sharp diplomat, and when necessary, an absolutely ruthless pirate. Her fleet of swift Irish galleys, propelled by both sail and oar, became the terror of the Irish seas. She established her own law on the water, imposing attacks on every single ship that dared to pass through her territory, and that included vessels flying the English flag. The terms were simple. Pay the toll, and you pass safely. Refuse, and you face the wrath of the pirate queen. Her galleys would descend. Your cargo would be seized, and your crew would be lucky to escape with their lives. This wasn't just random plunder. This was a systematic assertion of power. Gráinne O'Malley wasn't merely a pirate. She was a sovereign in her own right, a political force who commanded a vast network of coastal castles, with her main fortress at Rockfleet Castle, and held the unwavering loyalty of hundreds of fierce fighting men. To navigate the treacherous world of Irish clan politics, Gráinne used every tool at her disposal, including strategic marriages. Her first marriage was to Donal an Teagaid O'Flaherty, a hot-headed chieftain whose nickname meant Donal of the Battle. This alliance expanded her influence and gave her control of even more territory and castles. But when Donal was ambushed and killed by a rival clan, Gráinne didn't retreat into widowhood. She took command. She personally led her forces to defend his lands, and even retook a castle that was rightfully hers, earning her another nickname, the Dark Lady of Duna. Her second marriage is perhaps the most telling example of her incredible pragmatism and iron will. She married Richard the Iron Burke, or Risdard and Iareen, a powerful warrior from another influential clan. But this wasn't a marriage born of romance. It was a calculated political move. According to Irish Brehon law, defiant, a trial marriage for 1 year. What happened at the end of that year is the stuff of legend. Gráinne reportedly locked Richard out of Rockfleet Castle, her primary stronghold. When he protested from below, she simply yelled down from the battlements, "Richard Burke, I dismiss you." Used like that. She kept the castle, his fleet, and his continued political alliance. She got everything she wanted, completely on her own terms. But Gráinne was more than just a brilliant strategist. She was a fearsome warrior who led her men from the front lines. One of the most famous stories about her captures her legendary toughness. The tale goes that she gave birth to her son, Tibbet, while at sea. Just 1 day later, her ship was attacked by Algerian corsairs. Her crew was struggling, on the verge of being overwhelmed. Hearing the sounds of battle, Gráinne supposedly emerged from her cabin, grabbed 2 pistols, and rallied her men with a ferocious war cry. She led the charge herself, turning the tide of the battle and capturing the enemy ship. A new motor leading a counterattack against piracy that doesn't scream legendary courage. I don't know what does. However, Gráinne's biggest challenge came not from rival clans or corsairs, but from the encroaching power of the English crown. Queen Elizabeth I was determined to bring Ireland under her direct control, a policy that threatened the autonomy of Irish chieftains. Like Grace, the English governor of Connaught, Sir Richard Bingham, became Grace's arch-nemesis. He saw her as nothing more than a traitor and a troublemaker. He captured her sons Tibat and Morau, and her half-brother, Donalan Fiopa. He seized her lands and her fleet, effectively crippling her power base. Most people would have been broken by this, but Grace O'Malley was not most people. With her family imprisoned and her livelihood destroyed, she did the unthinkable. In 1593, this Irish pirate queen sailed up the River Thames and requested a direct audience with the most powerful woman in the world. Queen Elizabeth I. This meeting of two queens is one of history's most fascinating encounters. Imagine the scene. Grace, the Gaelic-speaking sea queen who had lived her life by her own rules, standing before the formidable monarch of England. They conversed in Latin. As Grace spoke no English and Elizabeth spoke no Irish. Grace laid out her case, arguing that Bingham's actions were unjust and that she was only acting to defend her own traditional rights. Amazingly, Elizabeth listened. The two women, both powerful leaders in a world dominated by men, found a strange sort of common ground. Following the meeting, Elizabeth ordered the release of Grace's family and granted her a pension, allowing her to continue her maintenance by land and sea, on the condition that she cease all rebellious activities against the English crown. Grace O'Malley had faced down the Queen of England and walked away with a victory. Grace O'Malley lived into her early 70s, passing away around 1603, the same year as Queen Elizabeth. She lived a life of astonishing adventure, courage, and rebellion. She was a mother, a wife, a chieftain, a diplomat, a commander, and a pirate who ruled the waves and commanded the respect and fear of all who crossed her path. She was a woman who was centuries ahead of her time, a true force of nature who carved her own kingdom out of the sea and the stone of the Irish coast. Her legacy endures in the songs, stories, and folklore of Ireland, a timeless symbol of strength, independence, and the untamable Irish spirit. What an incredible story. Grace O'Malley shows us what it means to be truly indomitable. Today, we're diving back into the turbulent world of the 16th century, right into the heart of a storm brewing off the coast of Ireland. While the incredible Grace O'Malley was busy forging a maritime empire, a powerful new tide was turning against her. Across the water, in England, the Tudor dynasty, and specifically Queen Elizabeth I, was growing tired of the old ways. They were no longer content to let Ireland be governed by its patchwork of independent Gaelic chiefs. A new, far more aggressive policy was taking shape. The Tudors launched a systematic, and often brutal, campaign to conquer the island completely. Their goal was simple, yet devastating: to crush the power of the chief, dismantle the ancient Irish laws and customs, and replace everything with the rigid structure of English law and administration. This wasn't just a political change, it was a cultural war. For the English commanders sent to enforce this new reality, Grace O'Malley was the embodiment of everything they sought to destroy. They saw her as a lawless pirate, a rebellious traitor, a constant thorn in their side who refused to bow to their authority. But from Grace's perspective, things looked very different. From the deck of her galley, she saw the English as foreign invaders. They were meddling in her affairs, disrupting her trade networks, and systematically trying to eradicate the very way of life that had sustained her family and her people for centuries. This clash of worlds forced Grace into a precarious and dangerous game. For years, she walked a tightrope, a master of political survival. One moment, she would lead her fleets in open rebellion against the English crown, raiding their ships and defying their edicts. The next, she would engage in strategic negotiations, offering temporary allegiance when it suited her purpose. It was a constant dance between defiance and diplomacy. She fought when she was strong and submitted when she was weak, all with a single, overriding objective: to preserve her autonomy and the power of her clan in a world that was rapidly closing in on them. It was a desperate balancing act, and one she performed with remarkable skill, buying herself precious time and space. But this fragile equilibrium was about to be shattered. The conflict was about to become deeply and tragically personal. A new English governor was appointed to Connaught, Grace's home region. His name was Sir Richard Bingham, and he was a man forged in a different mold. Ruthless, ambitious, and utterly determined to bring Ireland to heel. Bingham saw the O'Malleys not as a rival power to be negotiated with, but as a nest of pirates that needed to be exterminated. He had no respect for Grace's status as a chieftain. To him, she was simply a criminal, a disruptive force that stood in the way of his queen's will and his own career advancement. He was determined to break her, for good. Bingham's campaign against Grace was swift and merciless. He began by systematically dismantling her empire. He captured her ships, the source of her wealth and power on the seas. He confiscated her lands and castles, the ancestral heart of the O'Malley clan. His attacks were relentless, aimed at stripping her of every resource and every ally she had. But Bingham wasn't content with just destroying her livelihood. He went for the heart. In a devastating blow that would have broken a lesser person, he captured Grace's eldest son, Owen. Without mercy, Bingham had him executed. The message was clear. There would be no negotiation, only destruction. As if that wasn't enough, Bingham tightened his grip. He then captured Grace's younger son, Tibet, and her half-brother, Donnell, holding them hostage, their lives now dangled by a thread, completely at the mercy of the man who had just killed her firstborn. Imagine the position Grace was in. The aging pirate queen, once the undisputed master of her domain, was now completely cornered. She was robbed of her fleet, her lands, and her family. She was a queen without a kingdom, a mother grieving one son and fearing for two more. For all intents and purposes, she was defeated. But Grace O'Malley was not yet broken. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and beneath the grief and the loss, the fire of defiance still burned. She had one last, desperate card to play. It was a gamble so audacious, so improbable that no one could have predicted it. Defeat Bingham in Ireland. He held all the power. So, she decided to go over his head. She would take her case to the one person in the world who outranked him, the one person who might listen. She would appeal directly to his queen. The pirate queen of Connaught decided she was going to meet the virgin queen of England. What would happen when these two formidable women, two queens from two vastly different worlds, finally came face to face? Imagine this. 1593. An old woman, weathered by sea and strife, sails across the treacherous Irish Sea. She's not just anyone. She's Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen of Connaught, and she's on her way to meet the most powerful woman in the world, Queen Elizabeth I. This isn't a story from a fantasy novel. This really happened. It's a tale of two queens from two vastly different worlds, about to have a meeting that would echo through history. So, who was this Grace O'Malley? Born into a Gaelic seafaring clan in 1530, she wasn't your typical 16th century lady. While others were learning needlepoint, Grace was learning the tides, mastering navigation, and commanding ships. She inherited her father's shipping and trading empire, and she didn't just maintain it. She expanded it, becoming a formidable power along the west coast of Ireland. She was a leader, a chieftain, a mother, and yes, a pirate. She ruled the waves, collecting taxes from ships that passed through her territories. If they refused to pay, well, let's just say they often regretted it. She was known as Gráinne Mhaol in Gaelic, a name that struck fear and respect into the hearts of sailors and merchants alike. Meanwhile, across the water in England, Elizabeth I sat on the throne. She was the Virgin Queen, a master of politics and survival, who had steered her country through decades of religious turmoil and international threats. She ruled a centralized, powerful kingdom that was steadily expanding its influence, and that influence was creeping ever closer to Grace's doorstep. The Tudor conquest of Ireland was in full swing, and English officials were determined to bring the independent Gaelic lords, like Grace, to heel. One man, in particular, became Grace's nemesis, Sir Richard Bingham, the English governor of Bingham was a ruthless and ambitious man. He saw Grace not as a fellow leader, but as a troublesome pirate, an obstacle to English law and order. He systematically targeted her, confiscating her lands, seizing her ships, and crippling her ability to earn a living. The conflict escalated dramatically when Bingham captured Grace's son, Tibet, and her half-brother, Donnell. He had them imprisoned under the threat of execution. For Grace, now in her 60s, this was the final straw. Her family was in danger. Her entire way of life was being dismantled. She was cornered. A lesser person might have surrendered, but Grace O'Malley was not a lesser person. She decided to do something utterly audacious, something no one saw coming. She decided to go over Bingham's head, way over his head, bypassing all the formal, bureaucratic channels in Dublin. Grace decided to appeal directly to the Queen of England herself. Think about the sheer guts that took. A Gaelic sea queen, branded a pirate by English law, sailing into the heart of her enemy's territory to demand a face-to-face meeting with the monarch. It was an incredible gamble. She could have been arrested, imprisoned, or even executed the moment she stepped on English soil. But Grace was banking on one thing, that one queen might just understand another. So, she set sail for London. Can you picture the scene at Greenwich Palace? The opulent, sophisticated Tudor court, filled with courtiers in silks and velvets, suddenly confronted by this Gaelic chief, dressed in her own style, speaking her own language, a lifetime of sea battles etched on her face. And then, the moment arrived. Grace O'Malley stood before Queen Elizabeth I. Two powerful women, both rulers in their own right, both in their 60s, who had spent their lives navigating a world dominated by men. According to legend, they didn't have a common spoken language, so they conversed in Latin, the language of scholars and diplomats. The drama didn't stop there. Tradition says Grace refused to bow, arguing that she was a queen in her own right, not a subject of Elizabeth. Then, court guards noticed she was carrying a concealed dagger. When they moved to seize it, Grace calmly explained she carried it for her own protection. Elizabeth, perhaps seeing a reflection of her own steely resolve in the Irishwoman, made a remarkable decision. She allowed Grace to keep her weapon. It was a sign of respect, an acknowledgement of equals. Grace O'Malley was not there to beg for a pardon or a plead for mercy. She was there to negotiate. She presented Elizabeth with a formal petition, laying out her grievances against Governor Bingham. She argued that he had acted unjustly, stripping her of her lands and her livelihood, leaving her with no means to support herself by land or by sea. It was a brilliant piece of diplomacy. She wasn't just complaining. She was framing the issue as a matter of justice and royal oversight. Then came her masterstroke. She made Elizabeth an offer. It was a proposal from one leader to another. If the Queen would order the release of her son and brother and restore her rights and a portion of her property so she could live, Grace would, in turn, offer her services. And what services they were. Grace offered to place her entire fleet of galleys and her army of 200 fighting men at the disposal of the English crown. She offered to use her strength to fight against the Queen's enemies, wherever they might be. It was an astonishing proposition. The Pirate Queen offering to become the Queen's privateer. What happened next is a testament to the success of this incredible meeting. Elizabeth was apparently impressed. She saw the value in Grace's offer and the justice in her complaints. She issued a series of directives. Governor Bingham was ordered to release Grace's family members and to restore a maintenance for her from her estates. She essentially overruled her own governor based on the petition of this Gaelic sea queen, while Bingham dragged his feet and never fully complied with all of the Queen's orders. The immediate threat to Grace's family was lifted. She had faced down the English administration in Ireland and won. Grace returned to Ireland, not completely restored to her former glory, but secure. She had met the most powerful monarch in Europe on her own terms and had walked away with a deal. Her voyage to London wasn't an act of submission. It was an act of defiance, strategy, an incredible political skill. It cemented her legend as more than just a pirate, but as a shrewd and powerful leader who would do anything to protect her family and her people. The story of Grace O'Malley's meeting with Queen Elizabeth is a powerful reminder that history is full of incredible figures who defy our expectations. It's a story of courage, diplomacy, and the surprising connection between two of history's most formidable women. It shows that sometimes the boldest move is the one that changes everything. Last time, we left Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen of Ireland, sailing directly into the Lion's Den to meet Queen Elizabeth I. An Irish chief, a woman, a thorn in the side of the English crown, was about to come face to face with one of the most powerful monarchs in history. What happened next is the stuff of legend. Imagine the scene at Greenwich Palace. The court is filled with silks and velvets, with powdered wigs and hushed whispers. And into this scene walks Grace O'Malley, not in the finery of a courtier, but in the practical attire of an Irish noblewoman, a dagger at her side, her weathered face telling tales of sea salt and battles won. She refused to bow, seeing herself as an equal to Elizabeth, one queen to another. They spoke not in English, but in Latin, the universal language of the educated elite, ensuring no courtier could twist their words. Queen Elizabeth, a ruler known for her sharp intellect and pragmatism, wasn't offended by Grace's boldness. In fact, she was impressed. Here was a woman who mirrored her own strength and spirit. Elizabeth was a master strategist, and she saw a golden opportunity. Instead of pouring more money and lives into a costly war to subdue this troublesome corner of Ireland, why not forge a strategic alliance? It was a classic case of, if you can't beat them, have them join you on your terms. Grace laid out her grievances plainly. She spoke of the tyrannical governor of Connaught, Sir Richard Bingham, who had seized her lands, stolen her ships, and imprisoned her family. She wasn't just asking for mercy, she was demanding justice. And to everyone's astonishment, Elizabeth listened. She agreed to most of Grace's demands. It was a political masterstroke. She ordered the immediate release of Grace's son, Tibbet, and her half-brother, Donald. More importantly, she commanded Governor Bingham to back off, to cease his harassment of the O'Malley clan, and return the lands and ships that were Grace O'Malley returned to Ireland, not as a defeated rebel, but as a victor. She held a royal pardon and, more significantly, a form of official recognition from the English crown itself. It seemed like a new era was dawning, a chance for peace forged by two remarkable women. The pirate queen had sailed into the heart of English power and emerged with everything she had hoped for. But if you think this is where our story ends, with a happily ever after, you haven't been paying attention to the turbulent world of 16th century Ireland. This truce, as grand as it was built on very shaky ground. It was an uneasy peace from the very beginning. Back in Ireland, Governor Bingham was absolutely seething. He had been publicly overruled by his own queen, his authority completely undermined by an Irish chieftain he considered a mere pirate. Bingham was a man who believed in ruling with an iron fist, not extending an olive branch. He was furious, and he was determined to make sure this agreement failed. He began to undermine the truce in every way he could. He was a master of bureaucratic warfare. He'd delay the return of Grace's property, invent new charges against her men, and generally make life impossible for the O'Malley clan. While the open warfare between the O'Malleys and the English forces did die down for a while, the fundamental conflict hadn't gone away. It was like putting a lid on a boiling pot. The pressure was still building underneath. The core of the problem remained unchanged. The English crown was on a mission to centralize its power, to impose English law and English administration across all of Ireland. They wanted a tidy, governable kingdom. On the other side, the Gaelic clans, who had lived by their own laws and traditions for centuries, were just as determined to resist. They weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for their entire way of life, their culture, and their independence. So, where did this leave Grace? She was caught in the middle. For a time, it seemed she did her best to live up to her side of the bargain with Elizabeth. She had given her word, and she had received what she asked for. But Grace O'Malley was, above all else, a survivor. Her primary loyalty was never to a distant queen in London, but to her own people, her clan, her family. Her entire life had been a masterclass in navigating treacherous political waters. She continued to operate in that gray zone between loyalty and rebellion. She was a master of playing both sides. She would use her official recognition from the crown to her advantage when it suited her, but she would never fully abandon the old ways. She understood that the English promises were fickle, and that the only thing she could truly rely on was the strength of her own clan and the sharpness of her own wits. She was always looking out for the interests and survival of the O'Malleys. This delicate balancing act continued for several years, but the underlying tensions in Ireland were too strong to be contained forever. As the 16th century drew to a close, the situation exploded. In the final years of Queen Elizabeth's reign, The Great Irish Rebellion, known as the 9 Years' War, erupted across the island. This was the largest and most widespread challenge to English rule in centuries, led by powerful Ulster chieftains Hugh O'Neill and Red Hugh O'Donnell. And what of Grace O'Malley? By now, she was an old woman, in her 60s. You might think her days of fighting were long behind her, but you would be wrong. When the war began, the Pirate Queen was once again active at sea. Her ships, once again, prowled the waters off the west coast of Ireland. But this time her actions weren't ambiguous. She was actively supporting the Irish rebels, fighting against the very crown she had sworn to serve just a few years earlier. Her oath to Queen Elizabeth had been a strategy, a temporary measure to save her family and her clan. But when the final, decisive struggle for Ireland's future began, there was no question where her true allegiance lay. The Pirate Queen of Connaught was Irish to the bone, and she would stand with her people against the English invaders until the very end. Her life story is a powerful reminder that in times of conflict, survival and loyalty are complex, and the tides of allegiance can turn as quickly as the Irish Sea. Thanks for joining us for this chapter in the incredible life of Grace O'Malley. It's a story of power, politics, and the unbreakable spirit of a true leader. Imagine the wild, windswept coast of Ireland in the 16th century, a world of powerful clans, ancient traditions, and relentless conflict. In this world dominated by men, one woman rose to become a legend, a figure of such power and defiance that her story echoes through the centuries. This is the story of Gráinne Mhaol, Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen of Connaught, born around 1530 into the powerful O'Malley clan. Masters of the sea off the coast of County Mayo, Grace was destined for a life less ordinary. From a young age, the salt of the Atlantic was in her blood. A famous story tells of her as a young girl, desperate to join her father on a trading expedition. When he told her that her long hair would get caught in the ship's ropes, she simply chopped it all off, earning her the nickname Gráinne Mhaol, or Bald Grace. This single act of defiance was a sign of the formidable woman she was to become. She didn't just want to sail, she learned the art of navigation, trade, and naval warfare, mastering the skills that would one day make her a queen in her own right. Grace's world was one of constant flux and danger. The English crown, under the ambitious Tudor dynasty, was relentlessly pushing to extend its control over Ireland, chipping away at the power of the Gaelic chief. The old Gaelic way of life, a complex system of clan loyalties, alliances, and feuds, was under threat. Into this volatile landscape, Grace stepped not as a follower, but as a leader. She inherited her father's fleet and his title, becoming the chieftain of the O'Malley clan, a position almost unheard of for a woman at the time. But Grace was more than just a chief. She was a shrewd businesswoman and a brilliant military strategist. She controlled a fleet of galleys that patrolled the waters of Western Ireland, engaging in what some called piracy and others called legitimate trade and taxation. Any ship passing through her territory had to pay a toll or face the consequences. Her ships were fast, her crews were loyal, and her reputation was fearsome. She wasn't just raiding. She was building a maritime empire, forging alliances through both marriage and might, and creating a formidable power base that even the English couldn't ignore. Her personal life was as dramatic as her public one. Her first marriage, to Donnellan Shagid O'Flaherty, was a strategic alliance that expanded her power. After his death in battle, she didn't retreat into widowhood. Instead, she took command of his castle and followers, famously defending it against the siege, and proving her mettle as a military commander. Her second marriage, to Richa Daniarain Burke, was even more legendary. The story goes that they agreed to a trial marriage for 1 year, and at the end of it, Grace locked him out of his own castle, Rockfleet, and declared the marriage over, keeping the fortress for herself. Whether truth or legend, it speaks to her fierce independence and a refusal to be constrained by the conventions of her time. She was a mother, raising her children amidst the chaos of her life at sea, even reportedly giving birth to her youngest son on board her ship and returning to the deck to fight off pirates. Just 1 hour later, as the years went on, the conflict with the English intensified. The Crownist policy of surrender and regrant aimed to break the power of the Gaelic lords, forcing them to submit to English law. Grace initially resisted, but as English power grew, She proved herself to be a masterful diplomat as well as a warrior. The English governor of Connaught, Sir Richard Bingham, became her arch-nemesis. He saw her as nothing more than a troublemaker and a pirate, and he relentlessly pursued her, capturing her sons and seizing her lands and ships. It was this conflict that led to the most famous episode of Grace O'Malley's life. In 1593, in her early 60s, with her power base crumbling and her family under threat, Grace did the unthinkable. She sailed directly to England to seek an audience with the most powerful woman in the world. Queen Elizabeth I. Imagined the scene. The Gaelic pirate queen, barefoot and speaking in Latin, as she didn't speak English and the queen didn't speak Irish, standing before the Virgin Queen at Greenwich Palace. This wasn't a meeting of a subject and her monarch. It was a meeting of two powerful matriarchs, two queens who had ruled in a world of men. Grace laid out her grievances directly to Elizabeth. She argued that Bingham had abused his power and acted unjustly. She wasn't begging for a pardon. She was negotiating terms. In a stunning display of diplomacy, Grace secured the release of her son and the return of some of her property, promising in return to use her fleet to fight the Queen's enemies. It was a testament to her courage, her intelligence, and the sheer force of her personality that she could meet the Queen of England on her own terms and walk away with a victory. Grace O'Malley lived to see the end of an era. She died around 1603, ironically the very same year as her great rival, Queen Elizabeth I. Her death coincided with the final, brutal English conquest of Ireland and the collapse of the ancient Gaelic clan system she had fought so fiercely to defend. The world of the independent sea lords was gone, replaced by the centralized power of the English state. It seemed as though her legacy might fade with the world she represented, but the memory of the pirate queen did not die. Eat, Colden. In the centuries that followed, Grace O'Malley transformed from a historical figure into a powerful national legend. She became a potent symbol of Irish defiance, a figure of resistance against foreign rule, a female icon of courage and independence that resonated deeply with the Irish spirit. Her story was told and retold in folk songs, poems, and tales, her exploits growing more daring and more spectacular with each telling. She became more than a woman. She became an idea. Today, Gráinne Mhaol is remembered as one of the most remarkable figures in Irish history, and indeed, in the history of the world. She shattered every convention of her time. She was a woman who commanded fleets, ruled territories, and negotiated with queens. She was a brilliant leader who earned the respect and fear of both her own people and her powerful enemies. She was a chieftain, a pirate, a trader, a mother, and a diplomat, a formidable and complex woman who navigated a world of incredible violence and change with extraordinary skill, intelligence, and unwavering courage. The legacy of Gráinne Mhaol, the indomitable pirate queen of Connaught, is more than just a collection of historical facts and thrilling stories. It is a powerful and enduring testament to the unconquerable spirit of the Irish people and a timeless reminder that true strength and leadership know no gender. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time to meet the incredible Grace O'Malley. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.